U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio said Tuesday that reaching a deal with Iran could still take several days, and dampening expectations for a swift breakthrough just a day after Washington carried out what it called defensive strikes in southern Iran. For more on this tonight, we connect with Professor Robert Lawrence. Welcome, Professor Lawrence.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for joining us. Also joining us virtually is Dr. Youngshik Bong. Good evening, Dr. Bong.
Good evening.
Dr. Bong, the U.S. military carried out what it described as defensive self-defense strikes against targets in Iran. Now, what do you think was the intention behind carrying out the strikes at this particular moment and publicly disclosing them?
If I may assess the impact of the recent military engagement between the countries, I don't think it's going to be any significant impact enough to derail the ongoing diplomatic negotiations by both sides, because the United States described the launch as an act of self-defense strike on Iran. And the response by the United States military has been really restrained. The purpose described by the U.S. military spokesperson was to protect U.S. troops from threats posed by Iranian forces. But at the same time, although the U.S. military will be continue to defend the forces while using restraint during the ongoing ceasefire. So it reiterated a big commitment by the U.S. government on the ongoing ceasefire negotiations with Iran. From the side of Iran, that Iranian military has not done anything that would have led to dangerous escalation of tension after this engagement. So the U.S. launching self-defense strikes near the Strait of Hormuz must have been one of the tactical attempts by the U.S. military to maintain its closure of the strait, but the purpose was not anything so big or fatal.
Well, Iran is yet to issue an official statement on the American strikes. Now, in the meantime, Professor Lawrence, what does that tell us about where those negotiations actually stand at the moment? Because according to Rubio, it's going to take at least several days.
Well, like Professor Bong said, the U.S. is claiming that this is a defensive strike, and the strikes appear to be fairly limited. There doesn't appear to be any intention to escalate, which implies that both sides want to continue with the negotiations. So I agree with Professor Bong. I don't think that these are going to actually impede negotiations. To be clear, the negotiations are fragile. And both sides are sending publicly, conflicting messages. We keep hearing that 95% of the negotiations have been kind of agreed upon, and that there's only 5% left, but there are a lot of very crucial sticking points in that 5%. Just to name a few, Iran has maintained that it's not going to give up control of the strait and that the U.S. needs to stop its blockade. The U.S. maintains that it needs to be reopened to February 28th traffic, and no fees are acceptable. Highly enriched uranium. The U.S. says that Iran has to either give it up or destroy it under the supervision of an international watchdog. And Iran is saying that it hasn't agreed to even give it up yet, but there are some discussions of a third-party option. Iran's demanding that about $25 billion of frozen assets are unfrozen. And sanction relief comes up front, and the U.S. is saying that this can only happen upon compliance with its demands. The U.S. wants Iran to dismantle its centrifuges and commit to not having a nuclear weapon, and Iran is saying that it hasn't committed to any of those. And of course, there are other big issues on the table. Is Lebanon included in the deal? Iran's missile program and regional proxies. So, these have been front and center since the beginning of Epic Fury. Now, neither side wants to appear so desperate to make a deal that they lose leverage. But, while there does seem to be a little bit of movement compared to the stalemate before, the massive deficit in trust and how divergent each side sees these core issues mean that I think we probably need to temper our expectations.
Well, I do have to say a lot has happened over the long weekend. On Memorial Day, Trump once again declared that, Iran will never have a nuclear weapon. Now, again, Dr. Bong, the nuclear issue is being framed as a prerequisite for a sanctions relief, right?
Yes and no,
Oh.
because on the onset of the ceasefire agreement, after President Trump threatened to destroy all the civilian infrastructure, power plants and bridges inside Iran and turn Iran to the Stone Age. Um, the Trump administration initially insisted upon the original demand for the complete destruction and disablement of all the nuclear programs and facilities inside Iran, in addition to Iran handing over the highly enriched uranium, about 400 kilograms, 60% enriched. But there has been a slight change in tone and wording of the same demands with regard to Iran's nuclear programs and capability. For instance, President Trump posted on the social media that he would prefer those enriched uranium materials would be, destroyed inside Iran under professional international watchdog. I think that's a very significant change of his hardline position with regard to U.S. demand on the future of the Iran's nuclear programs. And Iranian side also has been, by and large, quite muted in terms of criticizing whatever statements regarding Iran's nuclear program and materials issued by the U.S. government, including the internet posting by the President of the United States. So, although these are very minute and subtle changes, they are significant in terms of us being able to detect ongoing commitment by both sides to keep alive the ceasefire negotiation, at least for a significant amount of time, like 30 days or 60 days, to give each other, opportunity to, lead the other situation to actual end of the military conflict by both sides.
Well, at the same time, the U.S. midterm elections are approaching in November. Professor Lawrence, Trump is also facing his own concerns from his own supporters over the possibility of a so-called, weak deal with Iran. To avoid such criticism that the agreement lacks substance, what do you think are the minimum conditions that must be included in any final Iran deal?
Right. There are there's a significant amount of misinformation and disinformation, emanated from multiple sides in this conflict. There's the international battle for the information space between the U.S. and Iran, and this kind of provokes domestic battles for information space between Democrats and Republicans, but also inside rival factions in the Republican Party right now. There's a lot of political pressure right now. Gas prices are high, and as of last weekend, the Memorial Day weekend usually kicks off the summer. We have the World Cup coming to America this summer. There's the 250th anniversary for U.S. independence, and of course the midterms in November, like you said. So a lot of people in the MAGA movement feel betrayed by Trump ever getting involved in Iran. And for them, the sooner it's over, the better. But, the Iran hawks, those like Senator Graham, Senator Cruz, National Security Advisor, former National Security Advisor Bolton, and former Secretary of State Pompeo, they've warned pretty explicitly to not be too eager to make a deal that might, lead the administration to be too conciliatory in their negotiations. For his part, he said that he's not going to make a bad deal. It won't be like the JCPOA, and the people don't know what he's actually doing. So it's tough to see how much this criticism is affecting his position. And it'll be impossible to please everybody. But for those who agree with attacking Iran, those hawks, they're going to want a dismantled nuclear system with robust oversight. They're going to want no Iranian possession of highly enriched uranium, the Strait to be back to pre-February 28th condition, and they want to disable Iran's capacity to project power outside of its own borders, along with some guarantees on the proxies. So it's a tall order.
I agree. Well, what's particularly striking is that Trump has brought up the Abraham Accords, Dr. Bong, while warning that military action against Iran could intensify if the talks collapse. The question is, do remind us what the Abraham Accords are, and why do you think he's suddenly linking them to the negotiations with Iran?
When you are desperate to defend your position, then one of the best solutions would be cover it up, cover the problem with something even bigger. The 2022 Abraham Accord has been hailed by the supporters of the Trump administration since the first term as one of the major diplomatic achievements by the President of the United States, bringing eternal peace on the Middle East by forging diplomatic normalization between former adversaries, between Israel and Arab countries, including Bahrain and UAE. Only two Middle Eastern countries recognizes Israel as a sovereign state and agreed upon diplomatic normalization before this 2022 agreement, which were Jordan and Egypt. So the Abraham Accord was hailed as a diplomatic breakthrough for enlarged circular peace that covers Israel and the Middle Eastern countries. And other countries also demonstrate their intentions to join the accord, such as Sudan, Kazakhstan, and Somalia. And Morocco also joined the accord. So the crown jewel of the future success of this accord, Abraham Accord, is Saudi Arabia joining the accord. But because of the accusation of massacre conducted by the armed forces of Israel, for the Palestinian residents in the Gaza Strip, these Arab countries have demonstrated their reluctance to speed up their process to possibly join the accord. So as I said, that it is almost impossible for President Trump to please and satisfy his supporters and critics alike that it was the correct decision by him to initiate this military operation to get rid of the nuclear capability and materials of Iran. Knowing this, then he has to come up with something big enough to divert the focus of public criticism and attention on Iran war. So expansion of the Abraham Accord might be one of his solutions.
Well, let's see how that strategic move actually works this time. Sorry to cut you off.
Right. I'd like to comment on the Professor Lawrence's remark that, yes, it is almost impossible for the President Trump to justify his decision to go to war in Iraq because Iran war has been taking a very similar trajectory as one of the so-called forever wars that the MAGA supporters severely criticize big mistakes and decided by the U.S. president, which undercuts the long-term stability and the growth of the United States, especially its strategic competition with China. So I think it is politically prudent for the Republican Party and President Trump himself to cut off the deal now than later, because the midterm election is not next month, but it is in mid-November, first week of November. So if you succeed in making a ceasefire agreement with Iran, your party still has reasonable amount of time to make a late comeback to defend itself in the highly contested election in early November. But if you drag on this ceasefire agreement too long with Iran, then you will not have enough amount of time to overcome the odds to actually do very well in the midterm election in November.
Well, he has about 3 months, I believe, to take care of that business. Now, at the same time, Trump appears to open to allowing Iran to destroy its enriched uranium domestically rather than, sending it abroad. Professor Lawrence, where is this flexibility coming from?
He seems to prefer to have it destroyed in Iran with conjunction with Iran and the Atomic Energy Commission or some international equivalent. Um, you know, from his perspective, I think he's probably trying to signal a movement away from maximalist posturing. You know, it's a form of compromise. This is sort of a pattern with him. He starts from a maximalist position, but he would actually be fine accepting a result of lesser value. You know, however, I'm not sure that everyone in Iran will see it this way. You know, some might see this as a concession that they can take care of in-house that is difficult to defend in an international court of opinion and that they can use as leverage in negotiations. However, you know, your more hardliners, they may see this as giving up on material that the U.S. was not able to take from them in the 6-week aerial campaign. This could provide material for the ultimate deterrent in time if they're patient. And it's therefore nonsensical to give it up willingly. You know, so Trump is trying to show flexibility to try to get a deal to the finish line. And I think he loses very little if he can ultimately guarantee that it's still destroyed, whether it's destroyed in Iran or in the U.S.
Then, Dr. Bong, let's say Washington ultimately accepts either the destruction of enriched uranium inside Iran or its disposal in a third country. How significant of a concession would that represent on the American side?
Well, it's up to how Trump administration is going to present the achievement. It's a matter of how the result will be framed as a huge success by the Trump administration. And the measuring stick is the 2015 JCPOA forged by Barack Obama administration that the Trump administration and President Trump, even before inauguration of his first term, severely criticized as one of the biggest mistakes in the diplomatic history of the United States. So any agreement with Iran with regard to Iran's nuclear capability has to be seen topping the better than the 2015 JCPOA. According to the JCPOA, Iran side agreed to maintain 3.67% for the highly enriched uranium. So any agreement possibly forged between Tehran and Washington this time should be lower than the mark of 3.67%. And about 97 to 98% of all the enriched uranium was taken out of territory of Iran, according to the 2015 agreement. Something that are really tangible in the suspicious eyes of the domestic constituents inside the United States, that this time the agreed result with regard to Iran's nuclear capability is at least as good as the 2015 agreement.
Well, Dr. Bong just gave us a pretty solid response, but I still do want to ask Professor Lawrence, if Iran's enriched uranium is transferred to a third country, the obvious question is, where would it go? Now, Russian President Vladimir Putin has floated Russia as one option, but realistically, which countries are being considered?
You know, Mojtaba Khamenei said, you know, just the other day that he was insistent that uranium was going to stay in Iran. So I think there's a domestic debate about this that's still, you know, may get in the way. But assuming that it does happen, you know, in the JCPOA in 2015, what Dr. Bong was just referring to, Iran handed over approximately 11 tons of low-enriched uranium to Russia. Russia's also offered to take it this time, so you know that's a possibility. But President Trump may be very reluctant to commit to anything that heavily resembles the JCPOA. You know, he was so adamant in criticizing this for years, and he eventually tore it up. And even just in the last 48 hours, he sent out multiple different posts or texts saying that this will be the opposite of the JCPOA. It will not be like the JCPOA. So he may be reluctant to make it happen to go to Russia. Now, there's also, we're seeing reports that China may be a destination, and that might be a face-saving option. But there's a question of neutrality with both of these options. You know, from a U.S. point of view, Russia and China weren't neutral actors in the conflict. Rather, they intervene on behalf of Iran in dual-use technology and providing intelligence and bankrolling the IRGC through oil sales. So I would think it'd be preferable to either destroy it in Iran or to have it transferred to the U.S. But it's tough to know what on what issues these two sides are going to be willing to budge and what they're going to take hard lines on in this negotiation.
Well, now that you mentioned China, Pakistani Prime Minister Shahbaz Sharif has visited China and met with the Chinese President Xi Jinping. Now, following meetings with the U.S. President Donald Trump and Russian President Vladimir Putin, what message do you think Xi is trying to send through this latest round of high-level diplomacy? Dr. Bong.
Well, China has become a so-called better substitute for the United States as a credible superpower in the midst of the ongoing war in Iran. And China has been using its economic, security, and diplomatic influence to exercise its impact on global affairs, which has not been only limited to the war in Iran, but Russia's position in the war with Ukraine, as well as the nuclear issues on the Korean Peninsula. And President Xi Jinping of China made it clear that if mishandled, then Taiwan issue will be the ticking bomb that may derail the security cooperation between the two superpowers, Beijing and Washington. So we are waiting for the Trump administration to devise its response to this warning issued by President Xi Jinping at the summit meeting in Beijing. And it is up to China whether it is going to play any constructive mediator to lead acceptable ceasefire agreement between the United States, Israel on one hand, and Iran on the other hand. Because the reason why Iran is so obsessed with the control of the Strait of Hormuz is that Iranian leadership and military have recognized that control of the Strait of Hormuz was far more impactful than use of nuclear weapons to compel U.S. changes strategic posture and military invasion of Iran. So China needs to make a great deal of influence upon Iran in order to persuade Iran to release its control of the strait in exchange for something comparable agreed upon by the United States.
I see. We'll have to leave it there for tonight. Dr. Bong, thank you for your time tonight. And also, Professor Lawrence, thank you for your insight as always. We appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
My pleasure.
We also thank you for staying with us tonight. This has been Kim Dami. Good night.